Okay, so I think we'll make a start. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I'm Charles Humble. I'm an independent technology consultant and also managing editor for cloud native consultancy firm Container Solutions. Before we get into the discussion today, I'd just like to thank Azul for making this roundtable possible. And I know you're all familiar with how panel sessions work, but obviously the main goal here is for you to submit your questions for the panel. So please do enter them into the Q&A module. And I will ask as many as I can to our panelists in the time we have. We have about 45 minutes in total. We have a fantastic group of panelists we've assembled for you today. And I'd like to start by asking them if they could briefly introduce themselves and maybe also tell us what drew you all personally to come and work with or on the Java platform. Simon, maybe you could start.
Okay, yes, I'm Simon Ritter. I'm the Deputy CTO at Azul Systems. And yes, when did I start Java? Well, way back in 1996 when I joined Sun Microsystems. And originally I didn't join to do Java, I joined to do Solaris, the operating system. And very shortly after that, it became clear that Java was going to be something quite big. So I figured I'd probably follow that. And I followed it all the way through the Sun years. I got acquired by Oracle and spent 5 years there. And then for the last 5.5 years, I've been at Azul, basically doing the same thing for a long time, which is to sort of promote the Java platform and help people understand how to use it.
Great. Tricia, how about you?
Hello, I'm Tricia. I am the, what's my new title? Lead Java Advocate at JetBrains. For a long time, I was the only Java advocate at JetBrains. I tend to work, I tend to do a lot of like telling people what's new in Java, what's great about Java, showing them inside IntelliJ idea, of course, but my focus is more on Java the language and Java the platform. I have been doing Java since I was at university. I don't know if I should say what year that was, but it was Java 1.1. And so I've been doing Java for a long time. I was a Java developer in a range of different companies for like 10 plus years. Then I worked at a company called LMAX, which is a financial platform in London. There we were doing loads of cool stuff with paired programming and with like open source stuff. I got involved with the London Java community, and it was then that I realized that I didn't just want to be a Java programmer. I wanted to take everything that I learned working with LMAX, working in the London Java community user group, and kind of help other people coming behind me as well. So share a lot of Java knowledge, which is how I ended up becoming a developer advocate, because I was like, oh, there's this job where I can tell people cool stuff that I've learned about Java. And so I've been doing this at JetBrains for 6 years now. So yes, it's the longest I've ever worked anywhere.
Wonderful, thank you. Ron, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Ron Pressler, and I'm a technical lead for OpenJDK project Loom at Oracle. I've been working with Java on and off for almost 20 years, but what drew me to work on Java, on OpenJDK, was the sheer technological achievement of it. If you're interested in compilation or garbage collection or low overhead profiling, then OpenJDK is the place to be. It's state of the art.
Great, thank you. Emily?
Hello, everybody. I'm Emily Jiang from IBM. I'm the Liberty Cloud Native Architect and also advocate. So I work on the open source project, Microprofile and Jakarta, basically design the specifications for doing Java-based cloud native applications. So I got involved in Java since 1999. I think I self-taught myself Java. And also I learned in the university. And then when I worked for IBM like 14 years ago, I just only work with Java. That's me.
Brilliant, thank you all very much indeed. So last year we celebrated 25 years of Java. What do you think it is that's kept Java so vibrant and popular for all this time?
Okay, I'll go then.
Someone has to go.
I think it's a number of things, obviously. I think the the initial design of the language was very practical. If you ask James Gosling, he's always described it as a blue-collar language. It was designed to get the job done. It wasn't a research project. It was very much about getting things done, and that obviously appealed to people a lot. But I think the real power of Java, the platform, is the JVM. And as Ron said, the OpenJDK project is where it's at because there's lots of really cool stuff going on there. And I think the fact that it has continued to evolve in such a way over those 25 years, and we've seen more and more things being added to it, and it's just become a more and more powerful platform. It just appeals to people, and the fact that it can scale up to internet type of sizes, that's what's really keeping it there.
So I think here's the other aspect of Java, because it's so easy to use, and also it has very rich ecosystem. Like when microservice was introduced, and then people say, oh, no, we need to go and to invent a different programming language. And then eventually, like people went to Go and went to other languages, and a lot of people came back to Java. It's because, yeah, some languages are powerful. However, once it goes wrong, you don't know, have no idea what's wrong. And then Java has a lot of toolings and support you, and Java community evolved really fast. So it's basically the community is vibrant. So it's basically the Java developers and trying to help each other and then invent like a new APIs and etc. to do the job.
I think, and I think Simon kind of alluded to this as well, but the backwards compatibility is really important for like enterprise type organizations as well. They want, they don't just, they're probably less excited about a language which is evolving and going places, and more excited about a language which like does the job, isn't going to break, allows them to just kind of get stuff done and get stuff done well. Even if you upgrade to the newer versions, the backwards compatibility is there. And the other thing is that particularly now you have all this momentum with the Java community. You have a lot of Java developers. So if you want to create a project which is going to be, you're going to be able to hire people to support, Java's a very appealing thing because you've got a whole bunch of Java programmers who can come on board. They have the community support, they have the library and framework support, they have that, Java has the good backwards compatibility. The JVM is powerful. You can run other JVM languages on top of it. I mean, like, what's not to like about a platform like that?
I think that over the years, the reasons for Java's popularity have changed. And these days, it is mostly recognized as a serious platform for serious software. Like Trista said, it's dependable, and it offers an unparalleled combination of performance, productivity, and observability, meaning monitoring and profiling. If you have an application that would need to last for many years and be maintained by a large team and needs very good performance and good runtime insight, Java is the obvious choice.
How important do you think the role of stewardship is in terms of the success of a language? We've talked about backwards compatibility and we've talked about the role of the community, but how about the sort of role of stewardship?
Wondering if an Oracle person should answer this.
Let's go on, Ron.
Yeah, I think it's very important. But the stewards tend to get much of the flack, right? People need to remember that there's only a very small group of stewards and millions of them. So it's a very tough job, almost thankless, I would say. But the stewards of the language and the platform in general need to consider not just whether or not something is useful. So people want, people say, I want this feature, it's useful. And oftentimes they're right. But it's not just about whether something is useful or not, but whether it carries its weight. Like, does the utility justify a change of this magnitude? And is this something that we see ourselves maintaining for the next 20 years? So making those decisions is hard, and that's the core of stewardship.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that Oracle and the people that like Ron sort of alludes to, so Brian Gertz, John Rose, Mark Reinhold, do a fantastic job of actually keeping Java in the right direction. It is a thankless task. It is very difficult to judge, should we add this feature? Because yes, lots of people will like that feature. Some people would not like that feature and go back and forth on it. And there can be a lot of discussion about it. But I think if we look at, certainly, if we go back sort of like 4 or 5 years in terms of how Java has evolved, especially with the new release cadence, we've seen some really nice new features, but introduced in a very positive way. And I think the benefit of things like preview features and the incubator modules has really demonstrated that by allowing fully formed features to be added to the language or the APIs, let people try them out and give feedback, and then potentially include changes on that before it becomes part of the standard, I think really is helping Java to remain popular and to continue in that sort of direction.
The other thing that's interesting and unique about Java is the fact that you have like OpenJDK, which is open source, although there are obviously various what's the right way of saying that, processes around getting involved with that. You've got the JCP and you've got the stewardship side of stuff. So you have this kind of unique combination of inputs into the language, which I think helps do things like maintain the standards, push things, suggest things that might push the language forwards. You have the stewards suggesting like maybe which direction that should go in. So I think at the moment, the way the language is going, that sort of tension, I think, is a good thing. And you have people like Azul who are able to commit stuff to OpenJDK, and it's not all just down to Oracle to move the language forward, and that's a positive thing.
Yeah, I think what Tricia said is absolutely true. I think it's keep Java kind of with the stewardship with Oracle's leadership and etc. I think also is open source. Basically, it's kind of encourage other companies to participate, and also like ask feedback from end users and get some input. I think these are all very important to like keep Java vibrate and move along to the right direction.
So we've got a question from Santiago. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name there, but what do you think of Java? What do you think Java? Where do you think, sorry, Java is right now compared to other languages in terms of functional programming, non-blocking I/O, and learning curve?
Well, Java is not a functional language. It doesn't want to be a functional language. But it does, like many other languages, adopt some particular aspects of functional programming. And it's made some, in fact, it's interesting, over the years since Java 1 until today, the biggest features that came to the Java language, most of the time when I say Java, I mean the platform, but speaking of the language, have come to Java from ML, a language called ML. So first we had generics, and then lambda expressions, and now we have algebraic data types in the form of records and sealed types, and pattern matching. And I guess in 2022, Java will be more or less on par with ML that came out in 1974 and 73. But that is largely intentional because even though we like many of the ideas, it's taken time for the programming is also about what people are accustomed to, and it takes time for it's also a matter of fashion, right? So when the fashion moves, languages move with it. Non-blocking I/O, well, that's Project Loom. I think Java is a very compelling story there. We'll probably talk more about later. Learning curve, compared to what? It's very hard to say. Maybe Python is easier to learn. C++ and Rust are definitely harder. So Haskell's harder, Scala's harder. Go is about the same. Yeah, so a good place in the middle, I think.
I'd like to make a comment on the learning curve side of stuff. So I talk to a lot of developers, particularly developers who are new-ish to Java or whatever, or returning to Java from another language. And there is criticism around the amount of boilerplate required to get started. You have to have a whole class, and you have to have public static void main. But honestly, that's like this. It's a bit of a pain in the neck. But once you get used to that, everything else is kind of fairly straightforward. Obviously, I'm going to start saying that IDEs are a good way to learn Java as well, because I work with IntelliJ IDEA. But IDEs really do help. And particularly, I work with other developer advocates doing other languages. And with something like Java, which is so easy for the IDE to help you with, because it's got all this beautiful, like, tight safety, and like, you know, the compiler will tell you a bunch of stuff. The IDE can say, do you want one of these? Do you want to do this? Can I generate you one of those? And yes, so there is a bit more boilerplate in Java, for example, than in some other languages, although it's going away, has been going away a lot over the last few releases. I think that using the right tools, like perhaps an IDE or a learning platform, Java can be a very approachable language to learn how to program well. If you're writing something like JavaScript or something, of course you can kind of like write it straight away, but does it do what you expect? Because you don't get your compiler errors, you don't get like useful immediate feedback, and of course I'm not trying to diss JavaScript at all, because there's a huge JavaScript ecosystem out there and it's very, very helpful. But a lot of that is like huge and moving very, very fast, and Java is moving much faster than it was. But it has a little bit more of this stability, which makes it a bit less intimidating to learn what's the right thing to learn now. So I think that I think for learning curve, Java is a very appealing language, but I think that we haven't really told that story very well lately. I think people get put off by having to have too many lines of code in their public static void main method, and then kind of leave it there, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, the other thing is for the learning curve, I think Java is moving quite fast. However, like when Java 16 was out, and then very soon, like you got YouTube videos from IDEs, like Treasure Yourself and etc. And then a lot of the developer advocate create videos and to show you like how to use these kind of features. I think it's very easy to get up to date with the new Java features and etc. I think it's just a need to find the right channel.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everybody's already said. The interesting point about the functional side of things, as Ron said, it's not a functional language. But I remember that when I was at university, I did one course on Lisp, and I very quickly realized that my mind didn't work in a functional way. I could do procedural languages, but I couldn't do functional languages. It just didn't click with me. But what I have found is that with the introduction of Lambda expressions and the Streams API in JDK 8, that was again, you know, my hat off to Brian Gertz and the people who did that. It was a really good way of introducing a functional style of programming into an object-oriented language and making it approachable so that people could use it. From a learning curve point of view, I think that Java is a great language in terms of getting started and, you know, again, as Tricia said, using the IDE to really help you and figure out what's going on and to get that sort of get started type of thing. And you can very quickly become productive with Java, but there are a lot of things to learn, little details that you need to pick up on. So the learning curve is sort of, it's okay, but then you've got to keep going. But again, as Emily said, there's lots of stuff out there. We have a great ecosystem. We have many people who are producing videos and articles, and you know, the access to information in a free form is just incredible for Java.
Thank you. So this is a question from Adam Dixon Chapman. Do any of you have any remarks about the path forward for ahead of time compilation? It seems like a good way to solve things like cold startup for serverless FAS, but a recent JEP, that would be 4.10, suggests that the community is backing away from it, or at least not maintaining a standard implementation for it. Is that right? What are people's thoughts on that?
Okay, I'm going to jump in on that one. Because I just did a webinar on this. Yeah, you see, AOT versus JIT is always going to be an interesting discussion, and it really depends on what you're trying to do. And a lot of people look at microservices and they think microservices, if you take it to the sort of extreme, you go serverless computing, where you want essentially a function that's going to start up, do something, and then shut down, then yes, speed of startup is absolutely critical to that. And yes, resources are going to be critical as well. But anything that's going to be running for any length of time, what you want overall is going to be better performance. And if you do pure AOT, then you're not going to get as good performance, especially with Java, than you will with JIT. Reason being that JIT can do things like speculative optimizations. It can do much more aggressive method inlining than you can get with static compilation. Now, yes, you can do profile guided optimization. That's been around for a long time, but it's still not going to be as good as being able to compile the code as you're actually seeing it run. So it's a balance of, do you really want fast startup, or do you want faster code when it's actually running and warmed up, as to why that's happening.
Also, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding about JET 4.10, which is not about AOT in general. It's about a particular feature and a particular implementation of that feature. And that particular feature doesn't do AOT that well. But to emphasize what Simon has just said, you want AOT if one thing is most important to you over everything else, and that is fast startup. And I think people are sort of excited about AOT. Maybe they think it does other things, but if startup is the one and only and most important thing to you, that is when you want AOT. If it isn't, you probably don't want it as much as you think. And before you try to do AOT, there are other solutions that can reduce startup time significantly, not nearly as much as AOT, but still, I would recommend looking at AppCDS, application class data sharing, and JLink. They sort of go nicely together. But if you are interested in AOT, then actually the community is thinking about it in the form of Project Leiden. I don't know how long it's going to take, when, and stuff like that. But I think people need to think more about when they actually want it and how important it is. So it might be addressed, but it's probably not a major requirement for most people, so it's not top priority.
I'm just going to jump in and just add one small thing, which is, because I work for Azul, we have our Zing JVM, and we have some technology which is called Ready Now, which essentially takes a profile of a running application when it has warmed up, and then you can reuse that to reduce the startup warm-up time on an application when you restart it. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. There are a couple of variations on this question. One from Tarek, for instance, which is to do with adoption, which is a notoriously difficult thing to measure, but certainly some of the research I did when I was prepping for this panel, it looks like Java 8 is still the most widely used version. About 3/4 of developers in the various surveys I looked at seem to be using Java 8, and then about 1/4 on Java 11. So what would you say to either Java developers who are stuck on Java 8 and perhaps trying to encourage them to move, and or to their managers to try and encourage them to move to a later version?
Yeah, of course, the answer is it depends. And I can see that the question says, other than records, new features, potential security, and performance. I'm like, well, those are the things I was going to say. The new features are great, performance is better, and security is going to be better. So the thing is, of course, it depends, like you say, who you're going to sell it to. So if you have to sell it to your management, they obviously don't care about records. They don't care about using var. They don't care about your syntactic sugar. For the developers, the features are really interesting. I've been using a lot of the features that have been coming in ever since 8. We're working on a Spring Boot application at the moment. The developer advocates are using Java 16. It's nice to be able to use records. It's just like they just work. It's great. It's nice to be able to use var when you don't want to put all the stuff in there. But like, middle management doesn't care about that. I feel like they should care a lot more about performance and security. And a lot of those things also can boil down to cost savings, actual money savings. Because obviously, if you're running faster, if you're using fewer resources and you're running in the cloud, like, doesn't that correspond to money saving? Plus also when you're talking about like hiring and recruitment and stuff like that, if you're using more recent versions of Java, that's kind of appealing too. So there's also to some extent the recruitment story. Of course, there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing there, because if most developers are currently using Java 8, they might not feel comfortable going to a job where they're using a recent version where they don't know what the new features are. But I think there's definitely appetite amongst the developers that I've been speaking to be working on at least Java 11 would be quite nice, and preferably 17 when it comes out. Yeah,
the other thing is kind of I think is even though you don't use the Java 16 features like record and etc., and then if you move from 8 to 16, and you still get garbage collection, all the optimization, all these performance and security fix and etc. So this is one thing. The second thing is keep the maybe the company attrition rate low, because people are allowed to use the kind of new shiny stuff and get developers engaged. Like they feel like they know all the kind of modern technology and etc. Their job is secure. So the third thing is kind of although Java 16 is not LTS, however, once you move to 16 and then like when 17 is out, it's kind of straightforward to move to 17. You don't have like a big shock or say, oh my God, my application doesn't work at all. You are completely like stalled.
I think in terms of adoption, it's I wonder if that 3/4 is actually correct, because I know there's several surveys on this, but I know when I was doing in-person conferences, which was over a year ago, asking people in the audience which version of Java they were using, and that was a year ago, I found there was actually more adoption of JDK 11, not than JDK 8, but more than, let's say, a quarter. And I think that has gradually shifted as well over time. I think more people are making that jump now. There is a little bit more work going from 8 to 11 than maybe from like 8 to, 7 to 8, let's say. But it's not that great. And I think that people are potentially thinking it's more work than it is. And when they actually make that switch, they realize, oh, actually, it's not as difficult as we thought, and off they go. And once you've made that switch into the module system, then everything becomes very easy after that, because moving to 12, 13, 14, and so on, there aren't really any issues in terms of backwards compatibility. And so it becomes a lot easier there. So I think the move from people to 11 to 17 is going to be very straightforward.
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, yeah, I agree with Simon. The numbers I have say about 60% are dropping on 8, and I expect by the end of the year, the majority will be on 9+. And the main reason to switch, and Trisha said it, but she might have buried the lead, is money. And it's why. So unless you're a company that doesn't care about money, you can say an 8. But if you do care, I suggest you move, because you're losing money every day you're an 8. You're just wasting on hardware and support, and the cost that you'll save by upgrading will almost surely dwarf the cost of the transition itself, and very, very quickly. One thing that Simon mentioned, you mentioned the module system. So first, many people have to do the 8 to post 9, 11 in many cases transition, which is the last ever major Java release. So 9 was the last major Java release. Since then, we just have minor releases, but that is a big one. It had various changes that caused difficulties, and it had the module system, but the two are not related. The difficulties that people see, less than 1% are related to the module system. They just know that the module system is the big feature, so they say everything is because of the module system. That is not why. The main reason is that many libraries over the ecosystem sort of ossified around Java 8, and people used many libraries, used relied on internal implementation details, and those internal implementation details just changed, and there were more of those in 8 than previous releases. More libraries that did that, and just when we tried to change anything, then many libraries broke. Since then they fixed, and that is why it's much easier to move to upgrade now than it was, say, 2 years ago. And of course, I hope that we'll see most people on 9+ by the end of the year Many of them will probably be an old version with an LTS service, so say 11. Part of it, most of those is probably by mistake. LTS, I think, is mostly good for legacy applications that don't see much development, but we'll take care of that. First, let's get everyone over the hump of 8 to 9, and then we'll clear up the confusion around LTS.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in with another thought that follows on from that, which is that we seem to be constantly telling the story of like, how do we sell people on upgrading? And I feel like perhaps we should be telling developers, us developers should just do it. Like, I have just done it on a bunch of open source projects and just swapped out Java 8 for Java 11, and it often just works. And that's how you can sell it to management. It worked. There's nothing wrong. It's running in CI. I've got my integration tests running. Nothing fell over. I didn't have to make any fixes. Let's just do it. Especially, like you said, Ron, since there was a lot of noise and a lot of like confusion around 9. But if you're using a modern version of Maven or Gradle, if you're using modern versions of the libraries, that will have taken care of a large number of the problems that were happening around about the time that 9 came out.
We've got a question from Dinka here. Is there anything you would advise people to stop doing with Java, either on the JVM or using a JVM language or the Java language itself, or anything which is not used much that you would perhaps recommend people to use more often? So maybe there are particular tools that have been added to the JDK recently that you feel developers maybe don't know about or which are underutilized.
Yeah, the one thing I'm going to tell people to stop using, applets. Just stop it. I did a quick Twitter poll on this because I wanted to see if anybody was actually still developing applets or using applets, and most people said that I think the majority of people had either never developed an applet or they had done it in the last century. So I think one person joked that they were actually currently developing one out of some couple of hundred of responses that I got. So yeah, if there's one thing in Java that you want to stop using, it's applets.
I don't think I have like one thing in Java I would tell people to stop using, but what I'm going to come a little bit back to the IDE, because to me, like, coding is all about the experience inside the IDE, but I'm always doing Java. Like, stop typing out all your code. Like, just stop typing it. The IDE is going to help you. It's going to generate stuff. Listen to those suggestions that the IDE says, actually, you know, you're doing this, like, I don't know, let's give a Java 8 example. Pre-Java 8, you're doing an anonymous in a class. Would you like to turn it to a Lambda? Just do it. See what the code looks like. Use the IDE to kind of help you learn the new language features. Use the IDE to remove code that's not being used or that's not quite read. I know that's not really what the question was asking, but my experience with Java developers is the idea that the language should fix everything, but we have responsibility as developers to be like, let's try and get rid of some of the crap that we're writing in our code.
Yeah, I would say maybe stop trying to look for the JRE. It is gone, and it's an outdated mode of distributing Java applications. Use JLink and bundle a custom runtime. You don't need to modularize your app to do it. Just run the JLink command. It's very, very easy, and you get your own custom runtime, which is very small, can be as little as 30 megabytes. It runs great, it's very convenient, and it's a great way to deploy Java applications.
Yes, the other thing is kind of the things that you don't want to use Java, and then you should keep an eye on all the gaps, like all the features being deprecated or to be removed, etc. You need to react faster, like to avoid using it, to avoid the huge migration headache in the early days.
So reactive programming is a style of programming that allows us to make better use of high throughput service. And obviously it's become fairly popular in the last 3 or 4 years. Since we've got Ron here, I was curious to know with Project Loom, if you think that reactive programming is something that you would expect us to continue doing, or whether you think it will be kind of superseded.
Well, the short answer is no. I expect people to use it less and less. And these asynchronous frameworks were designed to address a very real need, high throughput servers that handle a large number of concurrent requests. And these requirements simply cannot be met with the old thread per request model. that hangs on to an OS thread for the entire duration of a transaction. But while they make the code, those libraries, while they make the code more or less tolerable, provided that your entire application is written in that style, the sort of all or nothing, they just fundamentally, and it's not that they're bad, that they had to be this way, but they still fundamentally clash with the design of the Java platform and its tooling. So debugging and profiling applications written in that style is very hard. And most people don't like using them. They don't enjoy using them unless they have to. And Project Loom will hopefully make the old thread per request model scale as well as the asynchronous style. So not only you do not have to redesign an application for that technical requirement of large number of concurrent requests, but everything is going to be harmonious with the platform and the tooling that is still very much designed around threads. So those who genuinely enjoy the asynchronous style will probably continue using it, but everyone else won't have to get that same scalability and performance.
So I think the project Loom helped with the asynchronous programming, like dealing with all the new thread creation and utilize all the resources. However, we still need to have a higher level, like messaging. Like when you create a reactive system, or this application basically is and then you link with Kafka and you link with MQ and etc. So I think for this system is still need a kind of high level APIs. However, underneath it maybe be able to benefit the project Loom. So for the resource management and etc. So that's why in macro profile we still have the macro profile reactive messaging and to be able to to do the reactive messaging architecture and etc.
Simon, Tricia, anything you want to add?
Not really from my point of view. I think Ron kind of said it all, which is that Project Loom is the answer to this. I think that that's going to be a great way of sort of making life a lot easier for people so they don't have to take a different approach to the programming style. And so I'm very much looking forward to Project Loom being integrated into OpenJDK mainstream.
There are a couple of questions that are related to other languages on the JVM. I'm going to ask John's one, which overlaps with another here, which is, what do you think the relationship should be between Java and other languages like Kotlin and so on, in terms of in the future? Are they incubators for new ideas? Are they for specific niches? Are they competition to Java? How do you see that working? Maybe Tricia, you could lead on that one.
Yeah, I'd like to take that from the Kotlin side, although I don't actually work that closely with the Kotlin team. But yeah, JetBrains is still very heavily involved with Kotlin development, even though that's also an open source language, so we're not the only people developing on it now. But so Java evolving the way it has, especially in terms of borrowing and sometimes adapting some of the features from languages like Kotlin, does encourage the language developers of Kotlin to keep moving that forward as well. Because if Java's going to continue to release every 6 months and release with like nice, interesting features that other developers like, then a language like Kotlin is going to have to continue to have something which differentiates it from the old-fashioned slow Java type paradigm. So, and similarly, Kotlin, when they're introducing new features, like I guess I'm going to use a simple example, like they have var and val, and like Java has final var because it does. And when Kotlin introduces these new features, Java gets to look at Kotlin and go, oh, that's kind of useful and helpful and Java-ish, or actually we can't really get that to work that well within the Java community. So I really do see it being as a little bit of an arms race, but a mostly symbiotic relationship, because both languages get to borrow features from each other if they seem to work. Kotlin, of course, well, Kotlin has a number of different platforms. It can compile down to a bunch of places. It's not always just a JVM language, but Kotlin gets to benefit from the improvements on the JVM. So Kotlin is not always a full-on competitor to Java, as long as Java is improving its performance and its security. And I think things like, I feel like Loom is potentially going to benefit Kotlin as well. I don't really know how, but I feel like it could. As long as Java is evolving, it also benefits these other languages too. So I really do feel like this is like a symbiotic, helpful relationship between the JVM languages, Java the language, and the JVM platform.
I don't think Java has borrowed a single feature from Kotlin to date. It might in the future get nullability types. That would be maybe the first one. But the language that we're trying to borrow ideas from is ML. Like I said, we're still up to ML in 1973. That's sort of where we're aiming. So that generics, lambda extractions, records, seal types, and pattern matching, and then will more or less be at ML 1973. After that, we'll see, but, and we might someday, and var and val, that's also 1973 from ML, but one day we might get to the point where we're trying to borrow features from Kotlin and other languages, but different languages have different design philosophies, and Java's design philosophy from very early on was to be a very conservative language. The platform needs to be very innovative, but the language should be conservative. And it seems like a great success. And while there's a great many people who enjoy faster moving languages, it seems like most people don't. So it's great that the Java platforms offers a choice for everyone. So languages like Clojure and Kotlin and Scala are certainly faster moving and more innovative. And Java is intentionally conservative. And if you, depending on whichever one you like, then the design of the platform helps them work together. And one thing maybe I should mention here, one of the things that people sometimes complain about when it comes to the Java platform is generic type erasure. The one thing that makes all those languages work together is generic type erasure. If Java had built its own particular variant strategy into the runtime, then those languages could not have interoperated as well as they do. So it is thanks to type erasure that we get all those languages working together.
So one of the things I'm going to have a conversation with Ron about this at some point, which is like, at what point do we call Java ML, and why hasn't ML been so popular? But other than that, I think that the other thing is that clearly the Highlander principle doesn't apply here, as in there cannot be only one, and the whole idea of having multiple languages that have different approaches to how they deliver programmability is the important thing. And really the critical bit is the fact that they can all compile into bytecode, so they can run on top of the JVM and they can take advantage of the performance that you get from the JVM and the manageability and all that sort of thing. So I think that's the key thing there. And obviously, again, as Ron said, there is this idea of looking around and seeing what other languages do, primarily ML. We have, I believe, borrowed one thing from Python, which was the multi-line strings, because that had the 3 double quotes, and if I remember rightly, that was Python that had that. But yeah, I think that it's healthy to have a look at what other people are doing and think, okay, how can we use that?
Yeah, this is very true. I think we should encourage the multiple languages, and then with the competition, and they learn from each other, and then encourage other people, other languages to run faster. Like again, they are all JVM languages, so that community can work together to improve the JVM. This is great.
So we're almost at time, believe it or not. So to try and wrap this up, what is one thing that you'd like to see happening to help keep Java relevant for the next 25 years?
Java should keep on moving and don't stop. So keep the current pace.
Yes, I'd agree with that very strongly. I think the whole 6-month release cycle has been a fantastic move for Java to keep it fresh and keep it moving with bringing new features in more quickly. So I think that's one of the key things. We've got to keep that pace up.
Personally, speaking only for myself, I would love to see more focus on the small things. I said at the beginning that Java is a platform of choice for serious software, but I think it should be also attractive for less serious software, because that's where most programmers start. We've had some nice changes in that space, most notably JShell, which is REPL for Java, and the Java source file launcher that lets you directly run a single source file without separately compiling it. But we need to see more, and I would love to see a basic build tool that's part of OpenJDK.
I agree with all of that. I'm going to go on a slight tangent rather than talk about Java the language. And I think the thing which can continue to make Java relevant and attractive and a great platform going forward is the community, the user groups, the libraries, the frameworks, the fact that we share so much for free, the fact that there's a whole bunch of blog posts, videos, the Fuji thing that like Azul is kind of working on, like all of these things are just great resources to get developers started, to get them up and running. We've been working on this Spring Boot application as a team who is not very familiar with the technology, and all of the tutorials and blog posts and videos out there help us to get up and running really, really quickly. So even if there were a lull in the releases, even if there was something which kind of stalled the language for a while, like we had between maybe like 6 and 8, the language will continue to be relevant if the community continues to be relevant and active.
Very good point.
That's brilliant. Simon, Emily, Tricia, Ron, thank you all very, very much indeed for joining us today. It's been a great conversation, I think. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.